how to break down a writing prompt. So first of all, what even is a prompt? What are we talking about? Is that scary bit of words that you read before you know you have to write an essay in your English class, right? It's either going to be one quick line, quick question, or a couple of lines, or maybe even a full chunky little paragraph. As promised, I said I was going to do a higher level and a lower level. And I have with me my AP Literature textbook from high school and The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan, which I'm currently in the middle of reading. Subscribe and watch my YouTube shorts to see me make my way through the Percy Jackson series again as an adult. We're going to use these two as source material. Let's define another term: excerpt. So an excerpt is a chunk of text that is from a larger chunk of text. So it would be like stealing a paragraph or two from this book, and that could be put on a test for you to read, and then you have to answer the question or the prompt based off of that. Now, considering this is just about breaking down a prompt, I am not going to read excerpts from either of these, but I'm just letting you know that's typically what would accompany it. Today we're starting with fiction because in our curriculum, I'm a 7th grade middle school English teacher. In our curriculum, we always start off with fiction. So we have Percy Jackson, and then there is an excerpt from Pride and Prejudice in this book, which is one of my favorite classic novels. We're going to start off with The Last Olympian. So the prompt that I wrote for this, I actually wrote this prompt myself because I couldn't find any good ones on the internet. So there's that. But anyways, it says, explain how Percy's fatal flaw influences his behavior towards Luke throughout The Last Olympian. Always wanted to do a novel unit on the Percy Jackson series, but who knows if it'll ever happen. It would be expected of you by your teacher for you to be able to identify what Percy's fatal flaw is. So that's the first part of the prompt. You have to know what his fatal flaw is. Secondly, the word influences. You have to know what these verbs mean. It's something that does something that impacts something and something. That's always what a prompt is going to be like, and you have to explain yourself. You always get used to explaining yourself, guys. That's what English is all about. You can think something, great, but can you explain it? Can you back it up? A claim with no evidence means nothing. So how does his loyalty influence his behavior towards Luke? So now we have a couple other things. His behavior. You need to identify what his behavior is. So you need to identify his fatal flaw, and you also need to identify how his fatal flaw influences behavior, and then you need to identify what his behavior is towards Luke specifically. So of course, can you mention other characters like Annabeth, Grover? Yes. But if your whole essay is about Percy and Annabeth, I understand. But if your whole essay ends up being about Percy and Annabeth, then you lost the plot. So the hardest thing for people to do is to stay on track, is to stay on point, because we get lost in the sauce. We want to talk about all this other stuff, but it's like you gotta stay where the prompt is guiding you, right? Some of my students sometimes just ignore the prompt. You cannot ignore the prompt. The prompt is your guide. It is your instructions. On to the heftier prompt, which is from this bad boy right here. That is about Pride and Prejudice. So this one does have an excerpt. It's a pretty wordy excerpt. I actually remember reading this in class. But anyways, let's get to it. This prompt says, Austen's narrator offers direct commentary on the physical appearance of Mr. Darcy, noting his fine, tall person, handsome features, noble mien, and points out that he is quite wealthy. So we have some focus points in the prompt already. It is pointing you towards his physical appearance. So the instructions are drawing you towards his physical appearance for a reason. So pay attention to that. Then it gives you an excerpt in the prompt. Fine, tall person, handsome features. Next sentence. The narrator also explains that Darcy's manners gave a disgust which turned the tide of his popularity. But much of the characterization is indirect. We see Darcy in action. Bingley acts as a foil or contrasting character with his warmth, emphasizing Darcy's cool, aloof nature. The dialogue between Bingley and Darcy allows the latter to speak for himself, and what he says further characterizes him as arrogant. His meeting Elizabeth's eye, then turning away with a judgmental comment, suggests his inflated sense of self-importance. The following questions will help guide your analysis of character. How does the lack of direct characterization of Mr. Darcy impact the incorrect assumptions made about his character? I made that up on the fly, just saying. So, because most of this was about Mr. Darcy, right? So it gives you all of this information here. It tells you so much. So you would have to go through the excerpt, find those examples of indirect and direct characterization, because it's wanting you to compare the two. It's saying that he is characterized indirectly more than he is directly. And so that shows, and you have to have a lot of background knowledge on Pride and Prejudice for this one, because you have to know that Mr. Darcy is not a man of a lot of words. And because he's not a man of a lot of words, people think that he is rude and arrogant. Instead, he's just not a man of a lot of words. That's why it's called Pride and Prejudice. So Elizabeth, who is the woman in the story, she is prideful, thinking that, you know, he looks down on her, but in reality, he's so taken aback by her, he just doesn't even know what to say. So you would have to have strong knowledge of the text and the excerpt that you read to be able to break all this down. You also need to know what a foil character is. A foil character is a character that is created to show what is lacking or to show the difference between another character. So Mr. Darcy's friend is sunny and bright, and he says what he's thinking and says what he's feeling, just to emphasize how much Mr. Darcy does not. So you would have to know what a foil character is, what indirect and direct characterization is. So that's why your vocab has to be up, because otherwise you are going to be lost in the sauce. That is it for today's English lesson. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, okay? If all you learned today was that I am a super literature nerd, then hey, that's something that you learned, because I am. I love all kinds of literature. I love old literature, new literature, literature that hasn't come out yet, okay? I love middle grade, I love YA, I love adults, like classics, I love it all. And you can too. Come join me on this journey to further our education, to use our skills that we learned in high school and college, or just use the skills that we learned in life. If you didn't go to high school and college, you know things, you matter, you have an education. Just living, if you're living and breathing, you are getting an education, and you are able to get an education, okay? Let's put more resources out there. Let's help each other out. Read every day. Read for at least 10 minutes a day. We have to get our critical thinking and creativity back. Okay, guys? I'll see you in the next video. Bye.